Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Men's Sexual Mastery Podcast. This is your host, Ian Hawks, joined by co-host Benjamin Timby. What's up, Ben?
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Thanks for tuning in today. Ben and I are excited to dive into a conversation around the spiritual side of sexuality. This is a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, and it's not one that we choose to lead with up front, because depending on where you're at in your own journey, spirituality might not be of great importance to you. It might be something that you have your own preconceived notions about. It might be something that you even have some aversion to. And wherever you are, that's perfect for you right now. We have had the experience with many men who've come through our training program and community who have not had a spiritual practice for themselves, not felt much connection to a higher power or to spirituality in general. And through the process of aligning, awakening, nourishing, and cultivating their sexual energy in alignment, in integrity, there has been several times where men have shared with us that all of a sudden I find myself being really drawn to spirituality. What's that about? So today we wanted to have a little discussion around spirituality and sexuality and the merging of these two. So Ben, what comes up for you in your own experience with merging spirituality and sexuality?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the context you gave and the invitation for people with wherever they're at in this journey to, may this just be information that connects you to yourself ultimately. That's our intention here. And I would say for me specifically, my journey with this, coming from a very strong conservative Christian religious upbringing, in that space, sexuality was, it's interesting because it was never explicitly said that it was evil or sinful, at least in my circles, but it was like everyone kind of knew, or the understanding of in the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve eating the apple, that somehow that was connected to sexuality, and yet it doesn't say that actually anywhere. So yeah, there was always this. And that created like a kink for me, sort of like this. And that's what created my porn addiction. It was like this untouchable, this taboo area was just what drew me in. And for me personally, after decades of struggling with shame and guilt and suppression of my sexual energy, to come across these teachings from Taoism, from the yogic traditions, Ayurveda, all these places, understand this reframe as sexual energy, as spiritual energy, actually, and beginning to learn that context, really like everything clicked in my soul and in my mind, and finally it made sense. So yeah, I'd say this shift of understanding sexual energy as rocket fuel for our spiritual growth, as well as our physical growth, our emotional growth, our relationships, like it's all connected ultimately. And yeah, that's what I found is the biggest help for me, the biggest reframe that really led to me completely breaking free from all my sexual compulsions and finding actually sexual fulfillment and life fulfillment, first of all within myself, and then also bringing that into partnerships. So yeah, that's what comes up for me. I'm curious what you would have to say about that, Hawks.
Yeah, for me, the journey with spirituality started before my conscious explorations with sexuality. I grew up in a household where we went to church, but it was only on special occasions, Easter, Christmas, these types of things. And myself and my siblings, an older brother and an older sister, it the church didn't really vibe with us, and there was resistance from us towards that. And neither of my parents were dogmatic about that. They were also pretty loose uh, in that devotion. And so it just pittered out over time. We stopped going. I I had conversations with my mom growing up, I remember, and asking her about spirituality and religion and what her take was. And she always expressed a knowing within her that there is a higher power. And she didn't have a really clear framework around that. She didn't subscribe to a specific religion in a really deep or ideological way at all, but she had a connection. There was a spiritual connection there for her. And for my father, he was deeply connected to nature, to the earth, and that was his spiritual practice, going out mountain biking or cross country skiing. And we lived in a beautiful forest in a fairly remote area. And so I'm grateful because I feel that both my parents had an authentic connection to spirituality for themselves. And it was also difficult for me to really have much of a framework to make my own connections until later on in life, until becoming an adult and having some experiences of my own that started to shape my connection with spirituality. And that was incredibly nourishing for me. And then when I discovered, similar to you, the Taoist lineages and tantric lineages of sexuality and sacred sexuality, that clicked something really important for me in my spiritual journey and massively amplified it and felt like a missing piece for me. So yeah, it's a little bit about my journey. And I'm curious, Ben, how do you now experience this amplification of your spiritual practice and your connection to spirit through sexuality?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, it all happens very subtly, I would say. There was never anything immediate. Like as soon as I started, well, I would say when I was in my early 20s, and I mentioned this before on the podcast, and I went the longest I had without looking at porn or ejaculating, which was around 2 weeks. I remember just walking out along the streets, just like feeling this overflow of like love and well-being for myself and for everyone around me, and just conversations were easier, and just felt more at ease within myself. And shortly after that, I fell back into porn and ejaculation and all the rest. But I remember there was that brief sort of like almost like popping my head above the water of like and everything I'd experienced, for most of my teenage and adult life at that point. Um, and I had the kind of the slight intuitive ping in the back of my mind that this was connected to me holding my sexual energy, but I didn't. I don't think I had the strength to like really look at it or really implement that. I had it as such a huge coping mechanism at that time. But fast forwarding to now, I would say that that same thread of like what I felt back then has now become much more of my day-to-day reality. Um, and we talk a lot about like the physical benefits of this. Like my workouts are stronger, of course. Like I have clearer thinking, I'm more focused. And in the bedroom there's all these great benefits, more subtle pleasure and more attunement and more presence and all this stuff. But specifically that presence piece, I think when we bring it into spirituality and spiritual practices, I would just say my presence is deeper when I'm circulating this energy, and it's an ongoing, every single one of us has, we say we have different blueprints, like different guys are carrying different patterns. And so I don't want to speak for everybody and how this will work for you, but I would say my meditations are deeper, and my presence in day-to-day life. I have just more, I get more fulfillment out of life itself. It's just so subtle and so nuanced. It's like really difficult to even describe or measure. But when I have had more, it's like kind of switching, we say switching from junk food to like really, really good organic food. You don't know till you know. And like now that I've tasted it, now that it's my life, anytime I go back to, frequent ejaculations, or I have, when I have relapsed into porn, which has become far less frequent and less and less and less over time, it's like I feel the effect of it so much more. It's more of the negative effect I feel of constant ejaculation, or not holding my sexual energy in a sacred way, that really shows me what the effect of these practices is. So it's like a baseline for me that is really difficult to describe. But yeah, I'd be curious what you experience, or how you would answer that same question.
Hmm. The word that comes up for me is alignment. There's that sense that you were sharing of moving through the world, feeling like that confidence, that well-being, that connection with self and others that you tasted earlier on in your journey with conscious sexuality. The sense of being in integrity with self, not just the sense, but the lived reality of truly being in integrity, is something that for me has allowed the connection to spirit to really unfold, and to blossom. And using even the word spirit, like that might not land for everyone, so I could also just offer that it's the connection with me, the connection with the highest expression of myself. And that is what brings me the feeling of vibrancy, vitality, the confidence that I spoke to there, and ultimately an openness to connection with myself, connection with others, the free flow of energy and love and power. And those are all qualities that I associate with spirit, with God. It's to be in a lived experience of divinity within the self. And it doesn't mean we're perfect. I'm not perfect. But the more that I bring all of these different aspects of my life into alignment, and then the presence that you spoke to as well, that's the other big piece here. Because in order to really be available for the connection that's possible, it requires me to be present. If I'm connecting with myself, I must be present with myself. If I'm connecting truly with someone else, it requires me to be present with them. And that presence is something that, I'd love to explore why it is, from our perspective, that so many men going through the training and the program within men's sexual mastery, why it is that there tends to be this trickling, this bubbling up of connection to something beyond the self. And I think that really comes from the practices that allow us to develop more presence with ourself. And then through that, it's presence with others. And so there's that piece. And then the other side of it is also the reclamation of sexuality and sexual energy actually being fuel for us,
Mm-hmm.
rather than something that's wrong with us, or something that carries really heavy, dense energies like shame or guilt. And so that's another really important piece that we bring through. It's the reclamation of reframing masturbation, completely changing our approach to sex with self
Mm-hmm.
into something that feels aligned, that feels nourishing,
Sacred.
that is sacred. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that reclamation process for men who are still carrying levels of shame and guilt around their own sexual expression, being able to have a clear framework and a practice that allows us to reclaim that. part of ourselves, which is not going anywhere.
Mhm.
We are sexual beings, and thank God, because that is also the energy that moves through us, and the act of sex is the most sacred creation,
Yeah.
aspect of our role here on earth, or of what we have to potentially bring into the world, this new life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to pass it over to you.
Yeah, I
Uh,
was going to say I had something on that I love that you're bringing up the process piece here, like that what that looks like for guys, because this is getting pretty deep into it, but I think it's important to share. Like we, as you mentioned, the sexual energy is an amplifier. And this comes from traditional Chinese medicine. It binds and amplifies. We've said this over and over and over again. It's fuel. So fuel, gasoline, can burn down a house, or it, can cook a meal. Let's say, maybe not gasoline. Let's say fire. Fire can cook a meal or burn down a house.
yeah,
And
or
we
get
say,
you across the country in a vehicle.
yeah, yeah, any of those things. So it's not good or evil. Sexual energy, just because we say it's spiritual energy, doesn't even necessarily mean it's good or evil either. We're just saying that it's the most powerful energy. And so whether we're using it consciously or unconsciously is either going to cause pain and suffering, or can get us into levels of bliss and enlightenment. And when we talk about this process, it's really just it's that alignment you spoke to earlier. It's like when we can build a foundation within ourselves that we are who we say we are. We're not going and looking at porn when we're in a relationship and wasting our sexual energy or ejaculating it into spaces that aren't generative. We're just being intentional with it. And by the way, I'm not saying all porn or anything is all bad. It's whether it's conscious or not, or intentional, and like like how's it serving you. But for many men, as they're beginning this process, and I know you see this, Hawks, too, and I'm excited to break it down a little more. When they come into our training program and they start practicing circulating the sexual energy, building it, bringing in more practices, one step at a time, habit stacking, we like to call it, and bringing in self pleasure, and eventually later bringing that into partnership and touching some of these spiritual states. You could say it's very similar, these bliss states, to being in a state of deep meditation with the oneness. As you're building that energy within you, it's like a psychedelic experience. Like coming out of it, there's going to be a contrast with the parts of you that are not truly aligned with yourself, with, you could say, with God or the natural order of things. And so it's really like or you could say coherence or dissonance. If you're in cognitive dissonance, you are not being who you say you are. Maybe you're not loving towards yourself. Maybe you have all sorts of sabotaging patterns. As we bring in more fuel, as we turn up the volume, as we say, with this sexual life force, this spiritual energy, it can be really uncomfortable, because everything that's not in alignment with your true self is going to be up for shedding. And that's the process ultimately at its core of what a lot of guys find in this work as they stay committed to it. And a lot of guys are like, shit, I didn't even know what I was signing up for. Like, whoa, this is like a whole other dimension. And what's cool is that eventually when we break through those patterns, or as we continue to, it's an ongoing journey, even for myself, there's this union with ourselves on the deepest level. There's a union with God, with spirit, with our partners, as our mirrors, our quantum reality mirroring back to us how we're showing up, our level of presence and consciousness or unconsciousness. And it's all okay. Like, we've all been unconscious, we've all just kind of stumbled into this world, and we didn't necessarily choose it with whatever patterns we may have carried, or trauma or programs. But the beautiful thing about this is like, it almost makes me want to cry, just like how sacred this energy is when we contain it and let it build up, and what it exposes for us to grow into the men we came here to be. And so I just wanted to drop that as like the process as I see it. And then Hawks, would love to hear, what your observations are in that process.
Hmm. Yeah, as you were speaking to the process of allowing this sexual energy to be fuel that catalyzes bringing so many other aspects of our life into alignment, that's that's feels, yeah, real for me, and from what I've observed working with, many men through this process. And that comes back to the alignment piece. And the more that we allow our lives to fall into place, the more ease and the more freedom emerges for us. And it's through that place of ease and freedom that peace can emerge. And it's from the place of peacefulness that we have enough stillness within us to then open up to something beyond the self. And so there's that ongoing process that, yeah, you and I are both still in it. I think we all are until we reach enlightenment. It's an ongoing process. And there is so much opportunity for relishing and being in the beauty and the bliss of those higher states of our own consciousness along that path, even though we might slip and revert back into old ways at times, and unconsciousness certainly still comes in. um, so there's that, like, bigger picture, long term look at that journey. And then I also want to now dive into some of the juicy um, experiences, the momentary connection that can emerge when we're bringing that level of presence into our sexual practice, whether it's with ourself or with a partner. And it's greatly amplified in my experience when we're able to access those states with a partner. And so the practice of mindfulness, just presence, being fully here in my body in this moment, that is, breath work, mindfulness, meditation. These practices have all been shown through studies to quiet the default mode network, this part of our brain that's ruminating. It's thinking about the past or the future. It's analyzing, the environment around us and creating narratives and stories that are there to, protect us,
Mm-hmm.
but they also tend to interfere with our capacity to actually just be here and be in that state of peace and oneness. That is what I feel all spiritual practices are orienting us to. It's the lived experience here and now of being at peace in connection with all that is. And when we cultivate and refine our capacity to be fully present with ourselves through the early stages of reclaiming our sexuality and being attuned and present with ourself, that creates the brainwave state to then be in this heightened experience of pleasure and arousal while fully present, fully alive, and connected to self and then to all that is. And we can go into these states where actually there's a remembering of that connection to all that is. There's a remembering that I am and I am a fractal, a piece of spirit of God, that lives within me. That, and this language, take it or leave it. It's something that we get to experience for ourselves firsthand, and that's the like Gnostic approach of direct lived experience. And there's in my life, there hasn't been anything that has oriented me more clearly to spirituality than the direct lived experiences that I've had, feeling, breathing, being in that connection. And once we are able to have that, it doesn't matter what anybody else says or whatever preconceived notions or aversions we might have had to certain religions or spirituality in general, or the woo woo, stuff. That I get it. I get that that can be repulsive at times. And so having our own practices that allow us to connect with our own lived experience that then creates an authentic expression of what that connection to something beyond the self means to us. And so, yeah, to bring that into then lovemaking with a partner. Once we've cultivated the skill to be in that level of presence with ourself, then when we connect with our partner and we bring in the layers of attunement and polarity and bring in a masculine role, the leadership and the direction that creates the environment where there's trust and safety that allows our partner to fully surrender, to drop into her flow state, to quiet her prefrontal cortex and default mode network so that she can temporarily remember that truth that there is the divine within us all of the time, and tapping into that allows for this sacred element of sexual union to emerge, where it is so much more than the temporary pleasures of a physical orgasm. It becomes psychedelic, it becomes spiritual and sacred. And that is something that requires the foundation to be laid for us as men to be able to go into that experience and create the container and hold our presence in order to hold our partner through that. And while we're in that state, we're also then tapping into this incredible precision of presence and awareness, and it quiets all of the other narratives and stories and background noise in our lives, that then creates this aha moment of
Mm-hmm.
remembering the capital T truth of it all and of who we are. And that, in my experience, allows for a connection in intimacy and with our intimate partner that goes far beyond what the surface level possibilities are out there if we're serial dating or just seeking hookups, which, no shade on that. There's pleasure and joy to be had in those types of relating as well. But there are deeper layers that we can access, and it requires training. It requires the cultivation within ourselves and within our partnerships to lay that foundation for, the deep roots that then allow the tall, strong tree to reach up to the heavens and actually make that connection and that union of heaven and earth, the material and the spiritual, the physical and the energetic. And that's the that's the real juicy stuff that we get to tap into more and more and more as we go deeper into this work.
Yeah, and these aren't just like things that we're making up. I mean, they're being confirmed by our experiences and by all the men and women out there who are living it. But these are ancient, millennia old technologies, and that alchemy, you could say, that merging of heaven and earth, merging masculine and feminine, which, the sperm and the egg creates the new life. It's the creator energy, it's God energy, it's what's pulsing through every molecule in the universe, actually, on some level. Like, that's what we're tapping into. And it's just this, we're meant to be, in our natural state, without shame, without fear, without repression, without any of these shadow behaviors of sexual expression. Like, we can actually begin to connect with that level of depth that exists in our day-to-day, moment-to-moment reality. And all of this stuff is meant to just lead us back ultimately to that, and what a powerful gift it is to realize that this thing that's been hidden, down in the basement all this time and kept from us from in religion and spirituality and all these things is, I mean, it's like kryptonite, it's like it could kill us, look at all the sexual misconduct that can happen or the corruption that can happen with it. It's so powerful. it's just out of this world. But like when properly contained and when alignment, like we said, and one of the ways we maintain that is in brotherhood and an accountability, and is having other men where we're holding ourselves to certain standards to be in service to future generations, in service to having a stable world and stable families. Like I think there's a real beauty when men who are in this work, of really bettering themselves, are able to harness their sexual energy as like the rocket fuel that they've been waiting for. So, um, yeah, I love all of this, man. And I had a thought, actually. I should have mentioned it earlier, but real quick here, another analogy that I find is really helpful for understanding what it's like once you've been cultivating for months and eventually years, and you're starting to recharge your battery bank, we kind of say, in your organs and things like that, is what's taught within these teachings. It kind of reminds me of if anyone's microdosed mushrooms, just like a small amount. Like when we talk about the impact on spiritual practices, that's like the best analogy I can give, is like a very low dose of mushrooms, but nothing at all like that, because you're also fully grounded. You're more yourself actually than you are on mushrooms. But it is this just enhancer, of presence and of everything we do, and also increased awareness, I think, of what's out of alignment, or when my eyes are wandering, or when I'm, yeah, just like there's more responsibility, I think, that comes with more power that's being granted to us, by God, or by the quantum field, or yeah, by the source. So yeah, that's some last little tidbits I want to drop in here. And feeling like we're probably wrapping this, Hawks. I know we got to split here shortly. Is there any other pieces you want to bring in here before we sign off?
I guess the last thing I'll just come back to, or circle back around to, since you brought up the microdosing analogy, I see there's two of the most fundamental benefits of consciously working with our sexual energy and cultivating it in a way that allows us to hold a little more of that energy than we traditionally do. It's creating more energy within our system. And energy is what allows us to move through the world, to move our bodies, to connect with others, to it's the fuel that moves us. And that might even sound strange for someone who hasn't worked with these practices, but we get this again all of the time. There's a very common lived experience for men who go a little bit longer between ejaculations, cultivating a little more sexual energy. And one of the tangible, quantifiable ways that we can see that this is increasing our energy is there's less sleep required. I'm sleeping an hour or two less than I normally would, and yet I'm moving through my day with actually more energy and more consistent energy than I used to. And so, again, just like if any of this feels woo woo or unrealistic for you, I just can't encourage you enough to try it out for yourself. Get that lived experience. And then,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can, either affirm it or deny it from a place of informed, lived experience. So yeah, increasing our energy and then increasing presence. And it's the more presence and more energy is going to lead to more connection with self, with other, with spirit. And so, yeah, that feels complete for me.
Yeah.
Enjoyed our chat. I know you and I could go on for days and days
Oh
about this
man, so
topic,
good.
but I hope that this was an accessible place for some men to start who might not be even considering this, and for those of you listening in who we know some of you are out there that are already starting to experience this. Yeah, may this continue to create a little more clarity or direction for you in what you're experiencing and how to continue to nurture that. And would love to hear from anyone in the comments if something resonated or if something didn't. If you disagree with anything we said, bring that. We're here for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have any of your own personal experiences that you'd like to share, we love to hear it. So hit us up in the comments or shoot us a direct message. And yeah, we'd love to chat.
Yeah, and for any of you out there that feel the call to go all in on this work, we have a group training coming up on June 3rd. We have just a couple spots remaining when this goes out on Monday. So if you are interested, put in an application right away, menssexualmastery.com/application. We'd love to have you. That's the deep dive. This is the intensive training where we're really accelerating you in brotherhood with a proven system and framework and daily accountability, everything we've talked about in these podcasts. So if that interests you, hit us up. And just sending a shout out to all the brothers in our cohorts right now, all the brothers in our community. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast and supporting this mission. Send a big love to you and to everyone listening in. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
All right. We'll see you there. Take care.